All right, so I just want to start out by saying that I'm not a learned CAD designer. This is all stuff that, I don't know, just kind of figure it out as I go to try to make things. It's very rudimentary at times, but anyway, these are all the different items that I've made for the CX500, probably like over like the last year or so. Um, First thing I did was make this speedo block off, just to block the mechanical speedo output. It also works in the tachometer drive output off the front of the camshaft too. So I have one in each of those holes just to keep dust and stuff out. Put a light coat of grease around it and stuffed it in there. Not anything cool or spectacular. This next one, the bar switch. These are what I've been working on, um, for quite a while. It's just like, as I do them, print them, attempt to assemble them, I just noticed that there are, various different um, parts to it that I didn't like. These are kind of I would say final. I'm probably going to run the last set of these that I printed. They just take, I believe, 14, 12 millimeter push button switches. I can't remember how deep they can be, but I think those 12 mil buttons are pretty standard as far as depth go. Nothing really to hold them into place other than, glue or something if I ever want to use it, but it's enough of like a friction fit that the buttons are never going to come out or shouldn't really come out. Inside is hollowed out just enough for the wires to kind of lay flat. So on this top button, and actually let me do a section analysis. You can kind of see it there. Um, but there's just enough space around the outside of all this for the wires to kind of lay flat. So the wires coming from this switch kind of lay flat, go up and over, and then come down in. The wires from the switch that would be up here go back along this wall, kind of drop down and then go out, and then kind of same for here, just kind of shoot straight out. Not nothing too crazy, but I tried to go for like a kind of sleek design, if you will. Yeah, and then big thing, I know people are like, well, why don't you make them to hide in the bar? I don't really care about hiding wires. It's just not something that I really worry about. Um, yeah, it's just not for me. More so for me, I wanted it to look like sleek. There's only one piece of hardware required to pinch them onto the bars. They slip over the end. It does mean that you have to have grips off the bike in order to put them on, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Grips need to be replaced. Um, but yeah, these are these are cool. This is probably one of my more favorite designs that I've done for the bike so far. This is just a random headlight spacer. I don't nothing crazy. It's just a space out for my brackets on the forks to the headlight housing. This was like the first version of the gauge pod that I was coming up with, and unfortunately, I like deleted most of the um, pod that I had like developed. But the idea was at that point in time was I was just going to run the boost gauge and a fuel pressure gauge, and that was it. Um, that didn't really end up happening. And I'll skip ahead to the actual gauges that I came up with. What are they? V2? Yeah, so this is what I actually came up with. So I got a fuel pressure gauge here, boost gauge here, wideband O2 gauge here, the cheap like $40 or whatever it is pedometer tachometer combo. And then this is a temp gauge in this portion. And what's interesting too, and I wish I wouldn't have just copied over it, but um, this I originally did just as a cover for the factory handlebars. Um, And then, pretty quickly as I was like mocking things up on the bike, I was like, oh, I should just build the rest of it into that. So that's how that sort of came to be. Get rid of the all the gauges and thermometer. But yeah, this is kind of the final build that I came up with. I printed it in an orientation kind of similar to this, I want to say. So it was vertically standing on the print bed. The print bed's here and it was stood vertically. Of course, this piece I printed separate. This is like the back brace. But I did this in order to be able to get that fuzzy skin texture when I printed it, because it can't print that texture on a horizontal surface. It's got to be more of a vertical or sloped surface. And then I have this brace on the back. This ties into the back of the gauge, obviously, and then these two tie into the bottom side of the top triple clamp. It's pretty sturdy. This is a little frail up here. I might, we'll see if it breaks or whatever. I'll just redesign it. It's not a big deal. Um, or I considered maybe running like a leg out of here up to here, but then I don't really have anywhere to tie hardware in. And then so yeah, like actually behind the brace on the actual unit, I did the like melt-in threads. So they're like a brass thread that you use a soldering iron to press into here. So those are all brass threads. So hopefully they don't come loose, but I do feel like there's a good chance this is going to break if I hit a big enough speed bump or something like that, or a pothole. But, whatever. If it happens, we'll redesign it. It hasn't been road tested yet, so. These stator grommets, I was going to try to cast my own grommets. So I designed the grommets. They're kind of based off of the normal sizing, but this top one I put a 90 in so that it would spit out at a 90 instead of go kind of straight up towards the carbs. I tried printing out or kind of like poor man's injection molding using just like RTV gasket maker and some God, whatever that mold release and all this stuff. It didn't really work out. In fact, the only thing that I've used that mold release for that did work is the seat pan, doing the fiberglass seat pan. But yeah, so like you can see, I had various different parts to this mold, so I could assemble it in a few different pieces and be able to inject it in through these tubes. Um, I'd inject into here. Of course, there was hardware that would go into there as well. Um, how do I get rid of the body? Where's the body? Upper grommet? Yeah. So if we take the grommet out of there altogether, this void would have been what got filled. But I think part of it too is I'm printing with such a big print nozzle, or not such a big. It's a 0.6 millimeter, which is a little bit bigger than most people use for standard. It does leave for rougher prints, which means a rougher surface area requires considerably more prep to get it smooth and to get things to not stick. Ideally, it's pretty smooth. So I don't know. I just ran into problems with it. I didn't really carry on with the project too much. I just reused the factory ones and just made them work. So yeah, so this was actually the original temp gauge. So this was just going to sit. This was just going to sit on top of the factory triple clamp to cover up that fuse panel location, but then still give it some utility. Be able to use that area for something else. Temp thermostat or a temp gauge. This one's pretty cool too. This was my fan holder design. So this is like the factory shroud right here, if you will. I just use that to be able to size everything and try to get the angles of these legs all right. It turned out pretty good. It seems to work. I did print it out of ASA, so hopefully heat won't be a problem for it. I guess we'll see. So if we get rid of the shroud and the fan itself, And I forget, if people really want to know, I can link the cheap Amazon fan that I bought for it. I did have to modify that fan just to shorten it up a little bit, and increase the gap between the camshaft that I did cut the end off, and the motor housing of the fan. But yeah, this thing like is surprisingly pretty sturdy. I think these gussets really helped, and then screwing it, all four screws into that fan housing made it pretty rigid. But it's made out of plastic, so to some degree, it's got some flex. Diff tools, these were interesting. They didn't really work. Um, I was going to attempt to remove the pinion gear, but I couldn't. I couldn't make these strong enough to blast them out. But is what it is. I was only going to remove the pinion gear because I thought I wanted to powder coat it, but I ended up not doing that. And all this was is you would drop I think this, I would print this split down the middle, drop a big nut down in here that threads onto the end of my slide hammer, and then thread this body over the outside to kind of encapsulate it and hold it. But it didn't work. Trial and error, didn't work. Probably gonna have to make something out of steel if I want to pull that out. Battery tray. The We'll see if this works. Printed at ASA as well, because it is sitting, right here would be the tang off the end of the engine block, or the rear case cover, and then the normal, or the two mounting points for, actually I'm not even sure what was there originally. Um, but yeah, holds a YTX 12 or 14. I'm not even sure what it is. I just took the measurements off of it, made it work. Starter relay sits right here, and just two zip ties running through the back. This is hollow between here. You can run zip ties through there. Just little holders for Velcro strap, go the whole way around. And then this one, this part, I don't know if it's going to work. We will see. Under normal operation, a regulator rectifier should not get hot enough to melt this plastic. It is in an area where it gets, enough airflow that it should be fine. Um, but we will see. I don't know. This was something that, like, I know I should have probably made it out of aluminum or steel. And I obviously I can. Um, but it was so hot this summer that I just didn't want to be in the garage doing anything, and I'm, tried to skin the cat by printing something instead. Um, this is my taillight housing, which is kind of over engineered, really. Like, it just holds. Let me see if the bodies are in here. Um, it just holds these like bullet style taillights. And I easily probably just could have done some like L brackets on the, let's see if I got the frame. Yeah. I could have just like done some L brackets off the bottom of the frame and held those, or found somewhere else for them. But this is what I ended up doing. Again, kind of bored. There's a cap here to encapsulate all the wiring, pass through so you don't see any of it. And then this is a hole for the like push button or style seat release thing. I don't know what the actual name of it is, but this is my little taillight housing I came up with. I think it works pretty well. Um, it does kick down here, which is why this is kicked down, but I didn't feel like designing that in. I didn't really need it. I just wanted the centerline radius of that piece of tube with the thickness of the material on the bottom side in order to kind of space it out and see just how it would look. And I think it looks better on the bike than it does in CAD for sure. Carb tool. This was, I just had to epoxy some stuff on the carbs, and I didn't want it to get into any holes. So this was this fit inside the orifice, and then this body right here allowed epoxy to go around the outside but not fill the orifice, so I could pull it out. So it was basically, when I ended up drilling and tapping the fuel feeds to the float bowls, I pretty much blasted through the roof of the float bowls, which meant that fuel would essentially go straight down the orifice, and instead go across and down out where the float bowl valve would be. It would just spill straight out of the bowl right here. So that's why I had to epoxy that. We'll see if it works. If not, I've got a spare set of carbs. It's just the spare set of carbs, excuse me, has not been modified to the extent that these carbs have been modified for boost, obviously. And then the last thing was I went to rebuild my forks, and my fork seal driver only went down to 40 millimeters, and I needed 33 millimeters, so I just built my own fork seal drivers. So these key into the factory slide portion. The only problem was I kind of designed it based off of how theirs was, and I should have brought this. Let me see if I can actually edit this right now. But I should have brought this face out flush to the edge, like with everything else. Of course, it won't let me do it now because there's a chamfer right here. But yeah, just a slight oversight. It still worked fine. There was definitely some destructive testing happening as a result. But yeah, that's it. These are all the different things that I've kind of built for my CX500. Yeah, it's been fun. There's been a few of them. I don't know why that didn't just work. I want to see all of them. Here we go. But yeah, that's it. Pretty interesting. All right. Hope you enjoyed my TED Talk.